Thanksgiving just passed, and we all have one thing in common right now. We ate a lot. And while you may be thinking Grandma's pumpkin pie was the star of the show, I'm here to tell you about the real star of the show, your stomach. Now, the stomach is located in the upper abdomen, specifically the epigastric region, the left hypochondrial region, and the umbilical region. I told you it was the star of the show. It takes up a good portion of your abdomen. And if you have a good imagination, the stomach is a J-shaped organ, and it contains 4 different regions: the cardia, the fundus, the body, and the pylorus. So starting from the top, the cardia is what allows food to enter the stomach from the esophagus. The fundus is the top portion of the stomach, and then we move down into the body, which is the largest portion of the stomach where food spends its most time. And then the very bottom of the stomach is the pylorus, which is the gatekeeper of the stomach that keeps all of the food inside until it has been broken down sufficiently to enter into the small intestines to be absorbed. Now, I think we all know that the stomach is what holds the food, and that's what also is a site of digestion. But what exactly is digestion? Well, we eat this food, and there's carbohydrates and proteins and lipids in the food, and they're all relatively large molecules. So these molecules need to be broken down into something smaller that the body can absorb and utilize as building blocks for things that it needs. And this is what happens in the stomach. Digestion is just the breakdown of all of these large molecules into smaller molecules. But how exactly does digestion take place? Well, we need to go all the way back to the early 1800s to find this out. In 1822, Dr. William Beaumont was the doctor at Fort Mackinac in Michigan. And one day he was brought a patient, a young Canadian man named Alexis St. Martin. Now, Alexis was here working for the American Fur Company when he was accidentally shot in the stomach. And he was brought to Dr. Beaumont to heal his wounds. And at this point in time, that sort of wound was just too severe for anybody to survive. However, Alexis beat the odds, and Dr. Beaumont was able to perform a series of surgeries to actually help him survive. These surgeries were pretty crude and actually didn't help the wound to heal perfectly. There was still a hole in Alexis's abdomen after the healing process took place. So in the process of this, the lining of the stomach healed to the skin of the abdomen and left a hole that you could see into his stomach. Well, since Alexis had a hole in his abdomen, he couldn't work anymore, and the authorities wanted to deport him back to Canada. Well, Dr. Beaumont refused. He said this was too good of an opportunity to study an organ that hadn't been studied much before, and we didn't know much about how digestion took place in the stomach, and he had a window into the stomach that he could view, and he thought that was too good of an opportunity. And also, with this kind of wound, Alexis wasn't even thought to survive the wound, much less survive a trip all the way back to Canada in the early 1800s. So the deal that Dr. Beaumont made with the authorities was that Alexis would work at his house, and then in the evenings he would be able to study his stomach, and he essentially just watched Alexis eat to see what his stomach did with the food that was ingested. Well, throughout these experiments, he became an expert in digestion. At that point in time, before he learned everything that he did, digestion was thought of to be as a mostly mechanical process. So the stomach was essentially a blender of the human body. It just blended up the food and then sent it on its way. Well, now we know that it's actually very little mechanical and mostly a chemical process, this breakdown of food. And this happens through the use of hormones and gastric juices that are released from the stomach when food is ingested. So the hormones that are released are gastrin, ghrelin, histamine, serotonin, and somatostatin. And all of these hormones work together to create muscle contractions to move food along in the digestive system. And then those contractions also help mix up the gastric juices and the food. And then the hormones also produce the release of these gastric juices. Now, the gastric juices are what actually do the digestion. They break down the food, and they are composed of pepsin and renin and hydrochloric acid. Now, the pepsin and renin break down proteins, and pepsin works best in an acidic environment. So the hydrochloric acid is there to, yes, to break down food, but also to bring the pH down to a level of about 1 to 3 in order for the pepsin to work efficiently. Well, that is a significantly acidic pH. That's a harsh environment. That harsh of environment is created in order to kill off a lot of the viruses and bacteria that we ingest along with our food. But how is the stomach protected? You would think that such an acidic environment would eat the stomach itself, and it would, if mucus was not also secreted along with these gastric juices. So the mucus will form a layer on the inside of the stomach to protect it from this acidic environment. And most things can't penetrate that mucosal layer, and the stomach is protected. However, there are some forms of bacteria, like H. pylori, that can actually penetrate this mucosal layer and cause problems in the stomach. If this happens, then an ulcer will form. And an ulcer is essentially just a painful sore on the inside of the stomach. And now that we know that it's caused by a bacteria, it's easy to treat with antibiotics and can be healed pretty easily. But it is a very common ailment of the stomach. The other most common ailment of the stomach would probably be gastric reflux, and that's just when the gastric juices are allowed to go back into the esophagus and creates heartburn. It's very painful and can erode away the esophagus if left to go too long, but that can also be contained with medications. Other disease processes that happen in the stomach, stomach cancers are a possibility. They aren't one of the most common cancers, but it can happen. If a tumor starts forming in the stomach, generally the most common symptom would be a loss of appetite, but fatigue and pain and heartburn can also be symptoms of that. If there is a dysregulation in the gastric juices for any reason, that will generally cause pain upon eating because the food is not being broken down efficiently. So that also is something that would need to be treated. The last disease process that we will talk about in the stomach will be Crohn's disease. Now, this is generally a disease that is associated with the intestines. However, this inflammation and disease process that happens in the intestines can also move all the way up to the stomach. And when that happens, a lot of inflammation and pain will be created upon eating. This is very rare for it to go all the way up to the stomach, but it is a possibility and worth mentioning. So that was a quick overview of the stomach. Just a quick recap for you. Stomach is located in the upper abdomen. It is divided into 4 regions: the cardia, the body, the fundus, and the pylorus. Its job is to break down the molecules of food that we eat into smaller particles so that they can be moved on into the small intestine and absorbed into the body and utilized as building blocks for the things that the body needs. And that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you for listening.